Well, hello everybody. This is Connie from Off the Rails Quilting in Bondurant, Iowa. Today we are kicking off some YouTube videos on some of our special preferences regarding tools and notions. So today we're going to be talking about the Deb Tucker Studio 180 Wedge Star Ruler. And the Wedge Star Ruler is used in making this wonderful pattern called Jester. And so I'm going to demonstrate how to make the blocks in Jester and show you how easy it is to use this tool. Now, with Deb Tucker and her rulers, they all come packaged with the ruler. And the thing I really like about the ruler is that you can actually see which block it is on the ruler. And of course there are a whole bunch of different reference lines, but she also gives you instructions on what the lines are actually right on the ruler. So you've got that quick reference guide when you're using them. All of the rulers come with a very detailed instructions, and they are include left and right-handed instructions. So if you're a lefty and you feel like you've been left out because instructions are always written for the right-handers of the world, you're in luck because Deb does it for both ways. So that's an awesome thing. The other thing that's even a bonus with Wedge Star is, look at this. You get a free pattern when you purchase the ruler. It's part of the ruler instructions, and that's what's listed. That's what's on the wall here behind me. It's Freelancer, and you can make that any size, and the block sizes are anywhere from 2 to 13 inches. So you've got a lot of variety with the sizes you can use with the Wedge Star Ruler and the Deb Tucker products individually. The other thing I really like about her is that she has these instructions also listed on her website for free. Because if you lose them or you forget them at home, or you're looking at a quilt that uses a block like Wedge Star, you can look it up and see if it makes the correct size for the quilt pattern that you're making. So lots of information available for you free on her website. If you search for Deb Tucker or Studio 180, you'll be guided to her website, and it's under free downloads. Another really good thing about free downloads, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, I got to look at my phone here to see what it's under. There's also an area for assorted downloads, and that's specifically important with regards to this ruler. And I'm going to show you here what that chart is that I'm showing you. So this is a subcutting guide, and what this does, it tells you the number of pieces that you can get out of each strip of fabric, assuming it's a usable 40 inches. So if you're making your own design up, or you're trying to identify the yardage that you need, you can quickly look and see how many diamonds, small wedges, large wedges that you need for your project, and then be able to calculate the yardage that is needed. So complete package with instructions, all the different block sizes, all the different sub-cutting instructions, and finally, the numbers that show you how many sub pieces you can get for each strip set that you do. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into how we are using the Wedge Star Ruler for this block that is in the Jester pattern. I'm going to show you it one more time. And basically we have 4 fabrics. But you can make it scrappy. You've got a fabric A, which is kind of this teal, which is kind of a focal fabric in the pattern. B, which is the background, I would say. And then you've got 10-inch squares and 2.5-inch strip sets. So this pattern is specifically written it's recommended to use the Studio 180 Wedge Star tool. Now, if you don't have that tool, there are templates available in the pattern. She also gives you a couple of other rulers that may be helpful. The Creative Grid Spider Web or 45-degree kaleidoscope rulers are also excellent for this pattern. But today we're going to use the Wedge Star. And the Wedge Star is one of my favorites because I get perfect points, perfect lineup of my my different wedges when I put the block together using her ruler and her instructions. So we are going to first talk about how to make the block. So in Jester, this is your finished block. You'll notice that I've got the same color in my wedge as I do my background corners. And the difference here we got a little different shading of orange in each of these little stripes. This is one of the basic patterns with the Wedge Star. So if you're looking here at the freelancer pattern, basically what we are doing is this bottom block right here. The other instructions that have these little triangles that get you a little bit more of a pointed star in the middle of the block, those are included in the Wedge Star pattern, but we're not going to be covering those today. But basically this bottom block is what we are using today for the pattern Jester. Now, that doesn't look at all like the block that is in the quilt, right? So what you have to remember is that fabric placement is the key here. And so a lot of designers will use the same rulers, but they have different looking products at the end, and it's because of fabric placement. And so it depends on what your colorway is. It depends on where you're putting those wedges. If you're putting like ones together, it's going to look like a solid piece here. But in reality, there's actually 3 wedges here that make up this background area. So for using Jester, this pattern, we used a layer cake and some 2.5-inch strips. And then we have our common fabric that is used as the background and the corners. So in order to start this, you have your pieces that you'll be cutting to size according to the instructions in Jester. And you also have bands. So these bands that are around the actual wedge, those are added on at this point in the construction process. So you're going to add those to both the top and the bottom of that long strip. Now, she does give you very precise instructions in the Jester pattern for pressing, and I would highly encourage you to follow those. When I'm looking at this and I'm trying to sew these together, not knowing, especially the first time I use the ruler, I usually will make a practice block so I know exactly if I have a lot of edge factor with where this larger strip is on top of the long one. And for me, it's just easy when I get to sewing these if I just grab each of them and I identify the halfway point just with the finger crease. You can use your fingernail and you will get a little crease there in your fabric that identifies the middle of the long one and your 2.5-inch strip set here. And then all you need to do then is marry those points up together. And I like to sew with my longer piece on the bottom, that way I can see where it's at, making sure I still have pretty much equal amounts on both sides there. Once you get those sewn on and you press those seams open, and it's really hard to see on batiks, but they are open. They are so fine that it's hard to almost see which one is the right side versus the wrong side. Make sure you have the seams on the same side of the fabric here, because the next step is we're actually going to fold this in half. So right sides together, we are going to take that and fold it in half. And how do I know that this is my halfway point? I simply line up those edges, that 2.5-inch strip and my yellow on both sides. And you could put a pin in there if you want and do it again on the other side. And then we just press that in half. Now I went over to my iron and pressed it flat. I liked it that way because it was a crisp point, and that's what I'm looking for. I want it to lay nice and flat, because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Wedge Star Ruler, and she tells you which line to line it up on. And I'm not going to tell you all the details because then there's no need to buy the pattern. So you line up on that seam line where the two pieces join. So where the green batik down here and the yellow batik join, that seam line, you lay the prescribed line of the ruler on that, whether it's 3 inches or 4.5 or 5 or 6.5. And you simply line that up. And then when you trim that, you end up with wedges. And the wedges have a very pointed end. So this is not a ruler that you're going to receive that blunt point. This is a sharp point. Okay. Now, when you get all of those cut, you end up with your pieces that look like this. Okay. These are the wedges that we just cut. And the wedges in the corner, they start out the same. You still start out with your regular wedge, and then you will cut an oversized square in half. So you've got triangle pieces, and then you join those on the corners. So you end up with little, almost like an ice cream cone type of block. Now, once again, this is oversized, but I don't know exactly how much extra I have. So my rule of thumb for if I'm using stuff like this and I've got to find the halfway point, I simply finger press my corner piece and I finger press my wedge piece, and that way I can line those up and know that I've got the middles of all of those together. So now we're ready just to put the block together, and it really goes together rather easy. And so you just put it in pairs. So you've got your 4 quadrants, and your halfway, your middle seam here, it's on an angle because you're not creating a square where the wedge is lined up with that perfect diagonal or perpendicular and horizontal block. So you need to make sure that when you're putting it together, you don't think you made a mistake, because those pieces do go together in one straight seam, but it's not through the center point. It is at an angle. So when you're putting these pieces together, I match up 2 things for sure. I line up my points so that my points are exactly together. Remember, I said it's a fine point. It does not have a blunt end. So you'll want to make sure that those pointy ends are together. And then I also pin the intersection of my bands on each of these. So I make sure that those line up perfectly. So then you'll have a unit on this side and a unit on this side, and you put those together, and then you sew those 2 halves together. Now, what you end up with is a block where, check out these seam points. Look at how nice and sharp the center one is. Look at how the bands around the outside match up perfectly. Part of that is fabric selection. I love using batiks when you're using specialty rulers, especially like this, where you have a lot of fabric coming together here at the point. I have seen gals try to flatten this with a hammer before. It doesn't work that well. What you need to do is you press all of your seams open, including the last one. And yes, there's a lot of fabric there in the middle, but because you've reduced the bulk by as greatly as you can by pressing your seams open, it distributes it evenly, and so you don't end up with a huge bump in the middle. And you do end up with that perfect point combination there in the middle where all of those come together. So if you're looking at this block, you're going, it's not square because we have these oversized triangles on the corners here. So all that's left to do for getting your Jester block ready is to square it up. So this is a 12.5-inch block, and what you will need to do is you can use a Tucker Trimmer 3 or a large square that you have. You just want to make sure that when you're doing that, you're lining up this center point at the halfway point. So if my block is to be cut at 12.5, this center point is 6.25 inches on each side. So once you have your center point, then you just simply line it up and trim it, and then you're ready to move on to the next block in Jester. So once again, this is the pattern Jester, and it is one of the simplest uses of the Wedge Star with that little band around it. Like I said earlier, you can do some fancier stuff. You can add in these little triangles here, and the ruler actually gives you some guidance for how to do fussy cut. So if you've got some fun fabric that you want to fussy cut, you can do that with the Wedge Star as well. So I hope you have learned a little bit about the Wedge Star ruler, and thank you for joining us here at Off the Rails.